My ex-fiancée cheated with my brother before our wedding, and now she wants me back before I marry again. My name is Ryan, I'm 38 years old, and in just a week, I'm set to marry the love of my life, Emily, who's 35. We've been together for 4 amazing years, and I can honestly say she's my other half. But before Emily, there was someone else. A chapter of my life I thought I had closed for good. 12 years ago, I was engaged to my high school sweetheart, Jessica. We had been together for nearly a decade and lived together for 5 of those years. At the time, I was convinced she was my forever. Jessica and I had grown up in the same small town in Ohio, and everyone, from our families to our friends, thought we were a perfect match. My parents adored her and were thrilled when I announced our engagement. We spent months planning the wedding, going over every detail, from the venue to the flowers. I thought our future was set in stone. The night before our wedding, Jessica suggested we follow an old tradition, spending the night apart before the big day. She thought it would bring us luck and said she wanted some quiet time to herself at home. I didn't think much of it and agreed, staying at a hotel nearby. That night, I realized I had left my shoes at home, ones I'd planned to wear the next day, so I decided to swing by the house to grab them. When I got there, the house was dark, which was unusual because Jessica hated the dark. I figured she'd gone to bed early to rest up for the big day. But when I stepped inside, I saw something that shattered my world. Jessica was in bed with my younger brother, Alex. He was 34 at the time, and we had always been close. The 2 people I trusted most had betrayed me in the worst possible way. They didn't notice me right away. I stood there frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. When they finally realized I was there, Jessica screamed my name, but I couldn't hear anything beyond the pounding in my ears. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. I didn't say a word, I couldn't. I just turned around and ran out of the house. Back at the hotel, I locked myself in the room and broke down. Our wedding was supposed to take place the next day. Guests had traveled from out of state, the venue was booked, and everything was ready. But none of that mattered anymore. My fiancé and my brother had destroyed everything in one horrifying moment. Jessica sent me dozens of messages, begging for forgiveness and claiming it was a one-time mistake. She said the wedding had scared her, and she needed someone to talk to, someone who happened to be my brother. I didn't respond to her messages. Instead, I blocked her number and cut off contact with Alex as well. There was no excuse for what they had done. I knew I couldn't go through with the wedding, so I spent the next few hours making calls to cancel everything. It was humiliating to explain to vendors, family, and friends why the wedding was off. I lost thousands of dollars, but that was nothing compared to the pain I felt. My parents were devastated when I told them. They didn't know how to handle the situation, whether to comfort me or confront Alex. I told them I needed time and space to process everything. That night, I ordered room service, but I couldn't eat. I cried until I fell asleep. In the weeks that followed, I avoided Jessica and Alex at all costs. Jessica moved out of our shared home, and I saw her only once when she came to pack her things. A couple of years later, we crossed paths at a mutual friend's party. She tried to talk to me, but I walked away without a word. My parents eventually cut ties with Alex as well. The last I heard, he had moved to Europe and hadn't been home in years. Took a long time for me to heal. I struggled with depression and questioned my self-worth. How could someone I loved and trusted so deeply betray me like that? For years, I avoided relationships, afraid to open myself up to the possibility of being hurt again. But time has a way of dulling even the deepest wounds. Slowly, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. Now, over a decade later, I'm in a much better place. I have Emily, a woman I trust completely and love with all my heart. She knows everything about my past, including the pain Jessica and Alex caused me. I thought I had left all of that behind, until Jessica reached out to me just a week before my wedding. After what Jessica and Alex did to me, I spent years rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, avoided serious relationships, and kept people at arm's length. The thought of trusting someone again felt impossible. Every time I thought about opening up, I was haunted by the image of Jessica and my brother together. I questioned my own judgment, wondering how I could have been so blind. But as the years passed, the pain dulled, and slowly, I began to heal. That's when I met Emily. It was an ordinary Friday night. My best friend, Mark, practically dragged me out to a local bar in Columbus, Ohio. I hadn't been interested in going out, but Mark insisted. He said I needed to start living again. That's when I saw her, Emily. She wasn't loud or trying to get attention. She was sitting at a table with a few friends, laughing in this soft, genuine way. There was something so real about her. No pretense, no drama. Just pure, effortless beauty and warmth. Mark noticed me staring and dared me to go talk to her. I hadn't approached a woman in years, but something about Emily pulled me in. So I did. We talked for hours that night. I learned that she worked as a graphic designer, loved hiking, and was as obsessed with coffee as I was. It wasn't a fiery, overwhelming attraction. It was comfortable, natural, like breathing. One date turned into two, then into weeks and eventually years. Emily wasn't like Jessica. She was grounded, honest, and kind. She didn't play games, and for the first time in a long while I felt safe. I told her everything about my past. The betrayal, the broken engagement, my estranged brother. She didn't flinch. She listened, held my hand, and told me that my past didn't define me. After 3 years together, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. I proposed on a quiet autumn evening during a hike in Hocking Hills, surrounded by falling leaves. It wasn't flashy, just the two of us, and it felt perfect. She said yes without hesitation, tears in her eyes. For the first time in years, I felt like I had truly moved on. We spent the next year planning our wedding. Emily was meticulous but not a bridezilla. She just wanted everything to be meaningful. We chose a cozy vineyard venue just outside of town. It was intimate, surrounded by rolling hills and beautiful trees. Emily handled most of the details, while I focused on the music and food priorities, right? Everything was falling into place. The guest list was finalized, vendors were booked, and our closest friends and family were excited. Felt like a dream coming true. Then, exactly 1 week before the wedding, my past came crashing back. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone when a notification popped up. A Facebook message from an unfamiliar account. I almost ignored it, but something made me open it. It was Jessica. Somehow, after all these years, she had found out I was getting married. The message was long, rambling, and filled with guilt. She wrote about how it hurt her to hear I was marrying someone else and how she never stopped loving me. She begged me to meet with her to talk. She claimed she had changed and that losing me was the biggest mistake of her life. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I had blocked her years ago, so she must have created a new account just to contact me. The audacity of it all infuriated me. After everything she had done, she thought she could just waltz back into my life. Days before my wedding, Emily noticed my expression and asked what was wrong. I handed her the phone without saying a word. She read Jessica's messages, her face calm but focused. When she finished, she looked up at me and simply asked, "What do you want to do?" Part of me wanted to ignore Jessica, to block her and move on. But another part, the darker, angrier part, wanted her to suffer the way I had suffered. I had handled things like an adult all those years ago, walking away quietly. But now, I wanted her to feel the pain she caused me. I told Emily exactly how I felt. To my surprise, she didn't try to talk me out of it. Instead, she nodded. Emily had been betrayed in the past too, and while her story wasn't as extreme, she understood the sting of betrayal. Together, we decided not to let Jessica's intrusion slide. We spent the next few hours coming up with a plan. I messaged Jessica back, keeping my tone neutral. I told her that maybe it was time to talk and that I had been thinking about everything. She responded almost instantly, desperate and eager to meet. I told her I didn't feel comfortable having her over at my place and suggested she book a room at a hotel nearby. I promised I'd stop by the next day. Jessica agreed without hesitation. What she didn't know was that Emily was sitting beside me the entire time, fully aware and supportive of every word I typed. The next day, I arrived at the hotel alone. Jessica greeted me at the door with tears in her eyes. She looked relieved, as if she truly believed she had a second chance. She started rambling about how sorry she was, how scared she had been before our wedding, and how being with Alex was a mistake she regretted every day. I sat quietly, pretending to listen, even holding her hand for effect. In truth, I was waiting. About 20 minutes into her emotional confession, there was a knock at the door. Jessica paused, confused. I stood up and opened the door. In walked Emily, followed by our entire bridal party. Bridesmaids, groomsmen, all wearing fox masks with my brother's face printed on them. One of them even carried a cake with Alex's photo on top. Jessica's face went pale. She didn't know whether to scream or cry. We all stood there, silent, watching her process what was happening. She stammered, asking what was going on. I leaned in and coldly told her, "This is what betrayal feels like." Jessica broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, begging for me to stop. But I didn't feel sorry for her, not for a second. She deserved every ounce of pain she was feeling. After a few minutes, I told her never to contact me again. Then we left her there, alone in that hotel room, drowning in her own guilt. Emily and I walked out, hand in hand, stronger than ever. But the aftermath wasn't as simple as I thought. Some of Emily's friends found out about what we did and called it cruel. They said Jessica didn't deserve that, no matter what she did in the past. They even threatened not to come to our wedding unless I apologized. Emily stood by me, but I could see it hurt her that her friends were turning against us. I didn't regret what I did, but now I was torn. Should I apologize just to keep the peace and not ruin our wedding day for Emily? I didn't know what to do. Standing in that hotel room, watching Jessica's face twist from hope to pure horror, I felt a sense of cold satisfaction. For the first time in years, I felt like I had reclaimed a piece of the power she stole from me all those years ago. She sat frozen on the bed, staring at Emily and our entire bridal party. My groomsmen and Emily's bridesmaids, all wearing fox masks printed with Alex's face. The masks alone were enough to send a shiver down her spine. But the cake we brought, topped with a picture of my brother, was the final nail in the coffin. Jessica's hands trembled as she tried to speak, her voice barely a whisper. What is this?" I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and stared at her with an icy glare. "Oh, this," I gestured around the room. "This is what betrayal feels like, Jessica." Her eyes welled up with tears. She covered her mouth, shaking her head in disbelief. The room was heavy with silence, except for the quiet rustling of the masks as our friends shifted uncomfortably. Jessica finally broke, sobbing uncontrollably, mumbling half-hearted apologies and begging me to stop. But I didn't feel sorry for her, not one bit. Years ago, she left me shattered, humiliated, and broken. She ripped my world apart without a second thought. Now, for once, she was the one drowning in shame and regret. Emily, standing beside me, didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her presence alone spoke volumes, that she understood why this had to happen. She had been betrayed before, too, and she knew that some wounds demand more than silence to heal. After a few minutes, I finally broke the silence. "Jessica, you don't get to walk back into my life like nothing happened. You made your choice. You lost me the second you crawled into bed with my brother." Her sobs grew louder as she pleaded, "Ryan, please, this isn't you. You were always kind, you were always good to me. Why are you doing this?" I took a step closer, narrowing my eyes. "Because you deserve it." Without another word, Emily and I turned and left the room, the rest of our bridal party silently following. I didn't look back. Later that night, after the adrenaline wore off, I sat on the couch with Emily, staring at the blank TV screen. The initial rush of satisfaction began to fade, replaced by an uncomfortable stillness. I expected to feel relief or even pride, but all I felt was empty. Emily noticed my silence and rested her hand on mine. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. I sighed, rubbing my face. "I don't know. Part of me feels like she got exactly what she deserved, but another part of me feels like I stooped to her level. Emily was quiet for a moment. You didn't cheat. You didn't destroy someone's life. You reminded her of the pain she caused you. There's a difference. I nodded, but the doubt lingered. The next day, things got more complicated. Emily's bridesmaids started pulling away. One of them, Rachel, texted Emily saying she felt uncomfortable being part of such a cruel stunt. Another bridesmaid, Jenna, outright said she wouldn't attend the wedding unless I apologized to Jessica. Couldn't believe it. Apologize? To Jessica? Emily tried to defend me, explaining to her friends what Jessica had done, how she had slept with my brother the night before our wedding. But they didn't seem to care. They acted like I was the villain in this story. They called our revenge childish and vindictive, as if Jessica's betrayal was some minor mistake I should have just moved past. The hypocrisy infuriated me. These were the same people who claimed to support Emily no matter what, yet they couldn't understand why we took a stand against someone who tried to crawl back into my life and disrupt our happiness. Emily tried to stay strong, but I could see it was wearing on her. These girls had been her friends since college. She had shared years of memories with them, vacations, holidays, late-night talks. Now they were turning their backs on her over something they didn't fully understand. At first, Emily told me not to worry about it. She said, if they can't stand by us on our wedding day, maybe they were never real friends. But I knew it hurt her more than she let on. I started questioning myself. Was I wrong to do what I did? Had I gone too far? But every time I replayed the betrayal in my head, I reminded myself why I did it. Jessica had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She deserved to feel the weight of her actions. Still, the situation created a wall between Emily and her friends. They stopped responding to her messages and even started whispering behind her back. I overheard one of them say I was emotionally unstable and that Emily was blind for marrying me. That cut deep. I considered reaching out to them to explain myself to make them understand. But what could I say? That humiliating Jessica was the only way I could finally move on? That it was a way to reclaim my dignity? They wouldn't understand. Emily's maid of honor, Sarah, was the only one who stayed supportive. She told Emily, if they can't handle how Ryan dealt with his past, that's their problem, not his. I was grateful for her, but it didn't change the fact that half of Emily's bridal party was now threatening to back out. With only days left before the wedding, the tension was suffocating. Emily tried to act like it didn't bother her, but I knew better. She was stuck between supporting me and holding on to her friendships. One night, Emily broke down. I just wanted a simple, happy wedding, she whispered through tears. Now it feels like everything is falling apart. I pulled her into my arms. I'm sorry. I never wanted this to hurt you. She shook her head. This isn't your fault. I didn't think they would turn on me like this. I considered apologizing to Jessica, not because I thought she deserved it, but to mend things for Emily's sake. But the very thought made me sick. Jessica didn't deserve my apology. She was the one who reached out and tried to sabotage my happiness. I was torn. Should I apologize to keep the peace and make sure Emily's wedding day wasn't clouded by this tension? Or should I stand my ground and refuse to give Jessica or Emily's friends that satisfaction? The clock was ticking, and I had no idea what the right move was. The morning of our wedding arrived, and despite the tension with Emily's friends, I was determined to make this day perfect for her. Emily and I had dreamed about this moment for over a year. We planned every detail carefully, but nothing could have prepared us for how the day would actually unfold. The venue was breathtaking. A vineyard just outside Columbus, Ohio. The rolling hills and golden sunlight provided a stunning backdrop. Guests began to arrive, smiles on their faces, ready to celebrate with us. But something felt off. Emily's bridal party was noticeably smaller. Only her maid of honor, Sarah, stood by her side. The other bridesmaids, Rachel, Jenna, and 2 others, never showed up. Emily smiled through it, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. Sarah did her best to comfort her, but I knew this wasn't the wedding Emily had envisioned. Those girls had been her friends for years, and their absence was a deep wound. one that cast a quiet shadow over the day. But despite it all, we pressed on. The ceremony was beautiful. As Emily walked down the aisle toward me, nothing else mattered. The missing bridesmaids, the drama, the stress. It all faded away. In that moment, it was just us. Her smile, the way her eyes lit up, the way she squeezed my hands as we exchanged vows. It was perfect. We danced, laughed, and celebrated late into the night. Our family and friends cheered us on, and for the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. Emily and I were finally husband and wife. But peace was fleeting. 2 days after the wedding, life began to settle down. We returned home, exhausted but happy. Wedding gifts were stacked in the living room, and our house was filled with flowers and leftover decorations. We spent the day lounging around, watching movies, and basking in the glow of being newlyweds. That night, everything changed. It was nearly midnight when there was a knock at our front door. Emily and I glanced at each other, confused. We weren't expecting anyone. I got up to check, assuming it was a neighbor or maybe a late delivery. But I made a mistake. I opened the door without checking the peephole. Jessica stood there. Before I could react, she pushed past me, dragging 2 large suitcases into our house. Emily, who was curled up on the couch, jumped to her feet, staring in shock. "I'm here to stay," Jessica announced, her voice unnervingly calm. I froze. "What the hell are you talking about, Jessica? Get out." She shook her head, placing her suitcases neatly by the wall. "No, I belong here. You just need time to remember how much you love me." Emily's face turned pale. "Jessica, you need to leave. Right now." Jessica ignored her completely, focusing only on me. Her eyes were wild but steady, like she truly believed what she was saying. "I know you're angry. I get it. But once we spend time together, it'll all come back. We were meant to be. I knew it the second I heard about your wedding." I was stunned, speechless. This wasn't the same Jessica I remembered. This wasn't the manipulative ex-fiancée who betrayed me. This was someone unstable. "Jessica, you need help?" I said cautiously, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't normal. You can't just show up here like this." She laughed, a sound that chilled me to my core. "My parents tried to take me home, but I refused. I told them I'd be here with you. I knew you'd forgive me eventually." Emily reached for her phone. "I'm calling the police." Jessica's head snapped toward Emily, and for a brief second, I saw something dark flash in her eyes. "No, you're not," she hissed. "Ryan wouldn't want that." I quickly stepped between them. "Jessica, listen to me. You can't stay here. I'm married to Emily. You need to leave." She shook her head slowly. "No, that wedding wasn't real. Not to me. You and I were meant to be together. Emily's in the way." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just obsession. This was dangerous. I had to tread carefully. Okay, let's just talk, all right? Sit down, Jessica. Let's figure this out." I motioned for her to sit on the couch, trying to buy time. Emily silently slipped out of the room and into the bedroom, locking the door behind her. I could hear her frantically calling someone. Probably the police. Jessica sat down calmly, smoothing her hair as if this was all completely normal. "I knew you'd understand. This is just a misunderstanding. You're confused right now, but we can fix it." I watched her closely. She wasn't making sense. She was disconnected from reality. Minutes felt like hours. Soon, headlights flashed through our window. Police cars. Jessica didn't react until the officers knocked on the door. Her face twisted in betrayal. "You called the cops on me?" she whispered, disbelief dripping from every word. "Ryan, how could you?" I didn't answer. The officers entered, calm but firm. Jessica resisted at first, screaming that she didn't belong in a hospital. But they knew. They could see it too. She wasn't well. As they led her away, she screamed over her shoulder, "This isn't over, Ryan. You'll regret this." Emily stood beside me, trembling. I wrapped my arms around her, but I was shaking too. Jessica's presence lingered in the house, like a shadow we couldn't escape. The next day, I called Jessica's parents. They hadn't even known she was missing. Apparently, she'd fought with them and stormed out days ago. I told them everything. They were horrified and promised to handle it. But I wasn't convinced they could. Emily and I spent the next few nights barely sleeping, jumping at every noise. We double-checked the locks, closed the curtains, and kept our phones close. We lived in fear, unsure if Jessica would come back or if she was finally getting the help she needed. Emily tried to stay strong, but I could see it wearing on her. This was supposed to be the happiest week of our lives, but it had turned into a nightmare. I kept thinking about Jessica's words. "You'll regret this." Was it just a threat, or was she truly capable of something worse? For now, she was gone, but the fear remained. And for the first time since that terrible night years ago, I wondered if I'd ever be free of her. The morning after Jessica had been taken away by the police was quiet, eerily quiet. Emily and I barely slept that night. Every sound in the house made us tense up, and even though Jessica was no longer lurking outside our door, her presence still haunted us. I knew the situation wasn't truly over. Not yet. I couldn't shake the image of Jessica being led away in handcuffs, screaming that I would regret everything. As much as I hated what she had done to me in the past, and as terrifying as her appearance in our home had been, I couldn't ignore the fact that something was deeply wrong with her. She wasn't just being manipulative or vindictive. Jessica was genuinely unwell. I knew I had to do something. The first thing I did that morning was call her parents. Her mother, Linda, answered after several rings. Her voice was groggy and confused, and I realized they had no idea what had happened. "Linda, it's Ryan." I began, trying to keep my voice calm. "We need to talk about Jessica." There was a pause. "Ryan? Oh, what's going on?" she asked, her voice cautious. I took a deep breath and told her everything. From Jessica reaching out to me a week before the wedding to the hotel incident and, finally, her breaking into our home. I explained how we had to call the police because she refused to leave and how it was clear she wasn't in her right mind. Linda was silent for a long moment. "Oh my God," she finally whispered. "We didn't know. She left days ago after an argument. We thought she just needed space. We didn't realize it was this serious." Her father, George, took the phone shortly after. He was more composed but deeply concerned. "Ryan, I'm so sorry for everything. We'll handle this. We had no idea she was spiraling like this." I didn't hold back. "She needs help, George. Real help. Not just talking to her, not just asking her to come home. She needs to be in a hospital with professionals." George sighed heavily. "You're right. We should have done something sooner." We agreed to stay in touch, and they promised they would do whatever it took to get her help. I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. I hoped they meant what they said. Jessica needed more than just a stern talk. She needed serious psychological care. A few hours later, George called me back. Jessica had been transferred from the local holding cell to a psychiatric facility after she exhibited unstable behavior while in custody. She had been evaluated and was placed under a psychiatric hold for 72 hours, which gave the doctors time to assess her condition. George and Linda went to see her, and it wasn't easy. Jessica initially refused to talk to them. She blamed them for not supporting her, for trying to keep her away from me. She was angry, confused, and slipping further into delusion. The doctors diagnosed her with severe emotional distress, bordering on a psychotic break. It was likely that the stress of hearing about my wedding, combined with unresolved guilt and regret, had triggered something deep within her. The hospital recommended extended psychiatric care. George updated me on everything. They said she's showing signs of something much more serious than just depression or anxiety. She's gonna need long-term therapy, maybe even medication. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was still angry. Angry at her for everything she had done to me, to Emily, to my family. But another part of me felt an unexpected wave of pity. This wasn't the Jessica I once loved, and it wasn't the manipulative ex-fiancée who cheated on me. This was someone lost in her own mind. I told George and Linda that I wanted no further involvement. I had done what I could. Jessica was now their responsibility, and they needed to ensure she got the help she needed. George understood. You've done more than enough, Ryan. We're sorry it ever had to come to this. Days turned into weeks. Emily and I slowly began to relax. The fear that Jessica would show up again started to fade. I changed the locks on the house, installed a security system, and made sure Emily always felt safe. Her friends never reached out after the wedding. They had made their decision, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. Neither did Emily. Losing them was painful, but it revealed who truly mattered. Sarah, Emily's maid of honor, stuck by her side. That was enough. One evening, while Emily and I were having dinner, I got a final call from George. He wanted to let me know that Jessica had agreed to stay in the psychiatric facility voluntarily. She had started to acknowledge that she wasn't well and that she needed help. George and Linda had decided to move closer to the facility to support her during recovery. It was strange hearing that. A small part of me felt relieved, but another part felt like the final chapter of a very dark book had closed. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "And thank you for caring enough to call us in the first place," George replied. "I just hope she gets better." And with that, I ended the call. Life finally started to feel normal again. Emily and I settled into married life, free from the weight of the past. We focused on our future, on building a home filled with love, not fear. The shadow of Jessica was finally gone. Every now and then, I would think about her. I wondered if she was making progress, if she would ever fully recover. But I knew it wasn't my place to wonder. I had done everything I could. That chapter was closed. Emily and I had survived the chaos, the betrayal, the fear. Now we could finally move forward, free. And for the first time in over a decade, I truly felt free.